Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Lima, and I'm joined here with my partner and friend at Tyson, Keith Barber. And we're going to chat a little bit about why virtual design thinking workshops can be better than in person. Is it really possible to deliver a design thinking experience in a virtual venue that's better done than one in person? So we're going to show you how and why the attendees at some of the workshops done at Tyson Foods, where the attendees overwhelmingly stated that they were better done virtually. And we're going to show you some best practices and practical tips to prepare you to lead your next virtual design think workshop. So I'm joined by Keith Barber, and he's leading a digital revolution at one of the world's largest food companies. He's a dynamic leader, and he specializes in customer engagements through technology solutions and content that matters and delivers results. My name is Paul Lima. I'm a trusted advisor to the visionaries of today who are charged with creating the digital experiences of tomorrow. I've held senior product development and management roles in industry, and when I was in the military, I served among the nation's first cyber warfare leaders. And my personal mission is to apply innovation and help visionaries invent the digital future. So today's agenda, we're going to cover three areas. We're first going to just make sure everyone's grounded in design thinking. And we'll talk a little bit about the values of design thinking, things like human-centered design and empathy and so forth. Then we're going to get to the fun stuff. Why did Tyson think design thinking would be relevant? Why did they use it? And we'll talk about some of the best practices that we learned in some of the mistakes we made and around how to do remote design thinking workshops. And hopefully you can get ready to do yours. So let's pivot. Keith, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everybody. Thanks for that great introduction, Paul. I am Keith Barber, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. I thought before we dove in here, I'd give you a little background on Tyson Foods. We are a Fortune 100 company, currently ranked 66th. We are the world's largest supplier of protein, and the U.S. largest poultry supplier, and second in beef and pork production. We're also an 85-year-old company that has historically grown through a relentless focus on operational efficiency at our plants and supply chain. Our technology innovation has, by and large, been geared toward cutting production costs, not marketing to our customers. And to call us a digital-first organization, well, not so much. In fact, when I first met the team at Lima and was asked, where I thought Tyson was in terms of our digital transformation journey, I think I told Paul we were still learning how to spell the word digital. So obviously the technologies and solutions we are using are brand new and haven't been implemented previously at Tyson Foods. The problem we asked Lima to help us with sounds simple enough on the surface. In our food service segment, which accounts for approximately a third of our total revenue, we wanted to communicate with the 1.4 B2B customers and influence their path to purchase. Now, almost all of those buy our products through a distributor, so we don't have direct line of sight to sales data, or even customer data.
Yeah, that's a challenge, but don't be too hard on yourself, Keith. I think the vision that you've brought to the team and what you've been able to accomplish in a short amount of time has been astonishing. So, what we thought we would do here is talk a little bit about the context for the strategy that Keith put together. Really, the need here was to really think about data as the fuel that would enable their digital foundation and their digital transformation. And so, Keith, to set the context for the strategy, I'll just tell a quick thing here. When we met, you were in the early stages of identifying a digital strategy. And through several iterations, we kept returning through the stakeholder interviews and the whiteboard discussions late at night, what have you, and keep coming back. We kept coming back to the value of data. Matter of fact, this theme was so prevalent that it became one of the 3 pillars of our strategy. So let's do a little deeper dive on that particular pillar around the value of data.
Yeah. You're talking about pillar 3, really getting our arms around a really large amount of data, right? So data is the digital foundation. At Tyson, data needs to power all the cool MarTech and ad tech solutions that we've implemented. The math in those systems works best when we have a high octane data, clean data to power up all our new capabilities. Capabilities like marketing automation, personalization, and segmented offers. And like those who build foundations for a living, we're going to have to get our hands dirty. We really need to dig in here. It started with all of us doing our part to get the data we had out of Excel, out of Outlook, out of our notebooks, and really out of our memories, and get those into our systems like CRM. We needed to help everyone in the organization understand that customer data is important as having a home for that data. We kind of rallied around the age-old adage, usually taught to us by our parents when they told us to clean our rooms: a place for everything and everything in its place. Tyson, we're now constructing a place for all of our marketing and sales data, but we needed to explain to thousands of stakeholders the important roles that they have in inputting it into a centralized system so we can all access it. It's a valuable corporate asset, similar to money. At Tyson, we practice financial fitness pretty relentlessly and manage our money wisely. We need to have that same focus and diligence when it comes to data. One other nugget probably worth mentioning, Paul: all data isn't equal. We discovered that really quickly. The deeper in the sales funnel we go, the more valuable it is. So we had to help our sellers recognize that the closer they are to the customer, the more important it is to populate CRM. As the digital marketers see what closed, the deals that closed, we can use math to scale up what worked and feed more lookalike leads to our sales partners.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying, Keith, is in order for this initiative to take effect, we're going to change behavior. And we're going to need to learn how to do some new things and train hundreds, if not thousands, of folks. And in order to do that, we're going to have to learn how to think differently. And that's really, I think, where design thinking came in. So embedded with this common definition are the major principles or values of design thinking. Design thinking is a human-centered, collaborative approach to innovation, or what I would call problem solving. And it draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business outcomes and business success. So the principles of design thinking are commonly listed as human-centered approach, one that is collaborative, one that's creative, it's iterative, and it's practical. So if we take a look at, moving up into the 30,000 foot level, what does that look like in terms of really deploying it in an organization? And so we've adopted this methodology on the screen here at Lima, where it takes the values and maps them to the understanding and the opportunity to really dig deep into the challenge, explore it, and then find creative and practical ways that activate the potential solutions. So you notice the arrows on the bottom reflect the iterative nature of moving across the steps. And it's not like other methods where you might see chevrons. It's very linear. And that's because in a good workshop or over the course of the design thinking experience, we're going to extract a lot of ideas, a high volume. And some of these are going to turn into prototypes, not all of them. And some of those prototypes are going to fail fast. They might test flat. And the team can learn and iterate improvements and go back to the drawing board. So we start the first part of the exercise with an outside-in approach. That is, we need to start with the customer's perception of the job they want to do or the problem that they need solved. One of the phrases we like to use a lot is we need to put the problem in a box. And from there, we need to empathize and walk in their shoes. And we have some funny gifts when we do training. We talk about empathy cat and grumpy cat. So we get the creative juices flowing here about what is the problem from the perspective of the customer. And as we explore that problem by putting it in a box, defining it, then we can begin ideation and using imagination on how best to apply our capabilities to it, meaning the capabilities of the company, right? So both capabilities that we have today inside of Tyson or capabilities that we aspire to have. And then from there, we can begin to prototype. And then finally, we switch to our attention to prototyping. And in some cases, as was the case with Tyson, we stopped at the prototyping stage and moved on into implementation phases where we let builders build. And that's really the value of where Signavio came in. And we're going to show you how we were able to translate, basically from imagination to engineering, and maybe, if you will, combine into a new word called Imagineering. So Keith, pivoting from theory to the reality on the boots on the ground there at Tyson, can you tell us why you wanted to use design thinking methodologies in your role as the director for customer engagement?
Yeah, I guess first, I'm inspired by what the strategy is unlocking, and since the pandemic, it really has proven to be doubly useful in helping us develop direct relationships with those who use our products. We're able to innovate how we serve our longstanding distribution relationships while also opening up these lines of communication for the first time with 1.4 million businesses. We've leveraged design thinking because we were looking for new ways and new answers to bring to market at a time when our customers honestly needed us most. Now we're early in our journey, and there's been a need to align the vision, build consensus across internal and external partners, find the money, find the budget, and really address the inertia you might suspect would be present in an 85-year-old company.
Yeah, I think design thinking is the right tool for the job, right? To help us, particularly you in your role as a visionary, to bring in these new skills and to think differently using a common language. So a question that I get a lot is, when should we consider doing design thinking, or is design thinking appropriate for the problem that I might have at hand? And so I'm going to bring a technical solution here, or an academic word into the phrase here. Design thinking is used to solve wicked problems. You say, oh my goodness, wicked problems. Believe it or not, that is actually a technical academic term defined in 1973. Look it up in Wikipedia. It's pretty funny. So there's a bit of literature on what they are and their characteristics, but the biggest two are on the slide. The first is that the problem itself is ill-defined, and that is, the problem isn't in a box yet. And correspondingly, when you ask folks internally, how would you solve that? For example, collecting data on 1.4 million operators and customers, the typical response would be, I have no idea, or we've never done anything like that before. So your teams may not have the expertise to solve it internally. So there aren't the types of these aren't the types of problems that we can ask someone to solve as an individual. They typically involve teams of several specialists who may come together across several departments. In other words, the team that's going to solve it's going to be multidisciplinary, and they're going to be cross or interdepartmental. So the thinking to solve these problems isn't going to be done by sitting down with IT partners and saying and asking the question, what is your business requirement? Because a large part of the problem is actually defining the problem. It's not possible to have your IT partners ask you, what is your requirement? Part of the business requirement is for the organization to define the problem. And if it's ill-fated to begin trying to solve a problem that the organization hasn't put in a box yet, the answer will also be similarly something that might require new thinking. So not only is the problem hard to define, but the solution may not be something that you do today. And it's going to require new thinking. The second area is whether or not you've actually done it before. And if you haven't done something before, you don't have a line item in your budget for it. It's an unfunded request. Not only that, you may not have the skills internally to do it. So by definition, it's a first. And that means if you're leading that, you're a visionary. So that's the tricky part. To solve it, the organization may need to extend beyond your core competencies. And it typically is going to require new ways of thinking. And by definition, that problem may not lie in someone's budget. So the visionary is going to have to create a business case, recruit resources, justify the unfunded request, and get the dollars and the manpower behind it to get going. So those are the types of problems that lend themselves to design thinking workshops. So Keith, once we kind of put our problem in a box, if you will, and we were able to figure out we wanted to collect a certain amount of data that started with the billions of dollars, it was a pretty audacious goal. How did you wind up using design thinking to gain the interconnectivity and the multidisciplinary collaboration that you needed at Tyson?
Yeah, great question, Paul. Design thinking really provides Tyson a common language for cross-functional and interdepartmental teams, both internal, external partners, to be able to work together to produce innovative, human-centric answers to the most challenging problems we face. I think I've shared with you before, Tyson has 5 cultural tenets. We call them the 5 C's. And those are caring, candor, creativity, commitment, and then collaboration. It's this last one, collaboration, that really embraces the design think principles and process. Said another way, design thinking allows us to leverage a part of the great Tyson culture to enable us to think differently and really be bold in our approach to problem solving and creative design.
Yeah, and that's a challenge, right? 85-year history, and you've mostly sold through distributors, and lots of organizations experience that. Pharmaceutical companies sell through distributors, and financial services companies sell through brokers, and we could go on and on about every manufacturer sells through the big box stores, and they ultimately don't know who their customer is. And so that was a big, hairy, audacious goal. So let's dive into some best practices and lessons learned here. We made a kind of a controversial statement at the top that it is possible to deliver a design thinking workshop in a virtual venue that may be better received than one done in person. So before the pandemic, it was less common to attempt to do these remotely, but many customers who've hired us have in the past had asked us to do remote design thinking anyway. So we had a game plan going into it. And what we wanted to do was recreate the energy of an in-person brainstorm and, the quick-witted sense of humor that invariably is going to happen from a dynamic interaction that occurs in an in-person experience. But we also wanted the in-person experience, we know that they tend to accommodate extroverts in more ways than they accommodate introverts. So our facilitators needed to balance the airtime with those who might tend to take over a group so that participants who tend to be more vocal, that they can do their thing, and participants who tend to be more visual or prefer to share their ideas by writing can do their thing. So, Keith, how did you accommodate the different communication styles?
As in a lot of big organizations, consensus building is a necessity. At Tyson, we needed to reach consensus on definitions because there was a lot of learning that needed to happen before we could even treat the subject matter. So we made a game of it and followed up with a super quick quiz. On the left side here, you're going to see the actual quiz that we did. As a way to kick off our day, we opened up with a broad question to get the attendees to get the creative juices flowing, so to speak. The questions we were dealing with was, how might marketing automation help you in your job? We needed to keep everyone engaged throughout a 5-hour online workshop and balance the extroverts you talk about, Paul, that prefer to talk out their thoughts with those introverts who prefer to write out their thoughts. The remote workshop worked great and really exceeded every expectation I had. Um, I'd argue that it actually worked better than in person. It turned out that the remote workshop was more organized and more efficient. It also allowed for everyone to stay active during the entire workshop. Typical distractions from in-person workshops were eliminated, and it really provided a focused and concise effort from the entire team. The workshop was effective, it was efficient, and dare I say, it was actually fun.
You make me laugh. It's very rewarding. All right, and there was no place to hide during the workshop because it was fast and furious. All these little exercises, and I think there were around 9 of them. Just kept moving along, moving everybody along. So there were a lot of exercises here, and you referenced already 1 or 2 of these. But can you walk us through one of the exercises that best demonstrated the power of being able to do a design think workshop remotely?
Sure. We were working on a lead scoring algorithm, and there were a lot of competing views. But the most important thing we were focusing on was to ensure that the leads would be highly qualified, given the constraints of our small sales force. We want to fish where the fish are, right? So after we went through exercises to determine the factors that we would use in calculating the lead score, we had to give each one weightings. And one way of doing that is, everybody shout out 10%, 20%, 30%. But you guys brought a more innovative way to get there. So we ended up breaking down into 4 groups, and each group was given 300 coins. And they had to place those coins or their chips, as we call them, on each Post-it note. Notice that some of the cards there on the screen didn't even get weightings. The team at Lima put together a super tight agenda for us, and we used a tool called Mural, I think was what we called it, to put together this experience for us. The process brought out the expertise of the Tyson team by using small groups in breakout sections that allowed us to get our 4 opinions that were independently assessed. Then we brought those findings back together with each step before we returned back to our smaller sessions. There wasn't any downtime. Everyone was intensely engaged for the entire experience. That 5 hours, Paul, that flew by in what felt like about 30 minutes. And we were able to get to a final outcome in record time with greater participation than I've seen with similar in-person workshops.
Yeah, there wasn't anybody standing back by the donut and coffee table in the back of the room. That was for sure.
Absolutely not.
So this is a concept that I kind of call porpoising, right? Because we would come back together and talk about the findings of the round robin, the breakout rooms that we used, and then go back deep in terms of our little breakout rooms and continue to work on the next exercise, which might be to put coins against the points or the Post-its, or to determine which Post-it notes we wanted. And then come back and see, well, how did everybody else do, right? And then the groups could go back and independently work on their evaluation. And then for us as facilitators, we took what the learnings were, we clustered those together, and we were able to put together the lead scoring algorithm literally within a couple of hours. I think the next day we had our lead scoring algorithm. So that then determined our customer journey map. And this goes back to even, Keith's title around digital experience, right? And how do we launch a customer journey that's going to help us win in the market? So given that was a whirlwind day indeed, and we learned a lot about the market, me not being an expert necessarily in Tyson's business, but getting enough from the staff that we were able to build out a mathematically solid lead scoring algorithm. So from there, we developed some customer journeys using Signavio to test the model. And the customer journeys They're key when designing winning customer experiences. So that's no longer the domain of the creative ad agency just to come up and design a website with 3 to 5 landing pages and something like that. These journeys generally should not be outsourced. They need to be designed, with a multidisciplinary team that draws from several internal departments. So the problem is that typical customer journeys, they shouldn't just be pictures. And they shouldn't just be drawn in tools that are designed to create creative assets. Tools like, Adobe Creative Suite. Those are great for creating ads. But at the end of the creative process, the design thinking workshop, these journeys need to be given to engineers to build. And until Signavio came along at Lima, we were using tools like Lucidchart or Visio, but we didn't have a way to translate the journey from a picture to a process map, and from a process map to the associated data flows. So what I'm going to show here is an example of a customer journey that, unfortunately, the journeys that were developed at Tyson for this exercise were confidential, but the examples I'm about to show here look very similar to what Tyson developed. So we started out with creative maps, and then the process maps followed. But normally in most organizations, creative maps and process maps, never the twain shall meet. So ad agencies make beautiful creative journeys. A lot of times they come out as PDFs or JPEGs. They're pictures. And engineers make the process maps in tools like Visio or Lucidchart. And all of those assets then get stored independently as files in SharePoint or your wherever you store your files. So Signavio allowed us to bring our sales team, the marketing team, the IT developers and engineers and architects, and our business units together in a way that really hasn't been done in the past at Tyson. And there we needed a way to facilitate the desired customer experience from a creative perspective. So we built personas, and this is an example of a persona of another kind of a generic example of Janice and the information that we built in the work that Tyson did and is an example of building out deep personas. Once we understood Janice's problem, from there we were able to look at the data flows. Let me move along here. And the customer journey from the beginning, in this example of getting a new license in the state of Pennsylvania, what are the steps that Janice is going to go through? All right, and then from there, we looked at the data flows and the degree of customer engagement at every step along the way. And you might even be able to see here that her sentiment begins to change along the experience, that some steps are more stressful than others. So from there, and this is the key, this is the magic aha moment for us, those are the pictures of the journey map, but then we're able to map them one-to-one to the process map and the associated data flows. So when you give a picture like this to the builders, they know what to do. And there's a clear line of sight between all the good work that happens in a creative design thinking workshop and what happens when you turn that over as a prototype so that builders can build. Right? And that goes back to Signavio solving some challenges in helping improve the degree of collaboration across teams of people that have never really worked together, because we had to bring new capabilities together across departments that don't typically work. And then we use something called the Collaboration Hub at Tyson to allow transparency for all stakeholders to document what was actually determined. And that was another problem that I think we had at Tyson, is that we wanted to do a better job of documenting all of our processes in general. And I think that's something that most organizations generally struggle with. All right, so Keith, there's a lot that we covered there, and thanks for being so willing to share your experience with the Signavio user base. So we hope that the best practices presented by Keith and myself can help you put together your next design thinking workshop. So Keith, I'm going to turn it over to you to summarize some of the lessons that you learned in these recent workshops.
Yeah, awesome. And I don't know that we have enough time to do it justice, because I learned a lot, but I'll hit the highlights. I think first, keep the group small. It's really easy to think that because it's being facilitated on Zoom or Blue Jeans or whatever your favorite remote tool is that you can hold a lot of people, right? And that you can be more inclusive rather than less. But I'd certainly recommend resisting that tendency to invite any more stakeholders than you absolutely need to capture the insights needed to accomplish the business outcomes that should be defined at the outset. I think two, keep a balance of about one facilitator to every four participants. That way you can use the breakout rooms and the round robin exercises to keep a high degree of engagement throughout the entire day. Ensure your facilitators spend the time to build out exercises and accommodate both extroverts who think out loud and then the introverts who prefer to get their thoughts out on paper. I also think using a design thinking framework like the one Paul showed, we learned in our first workshop that we needed to spend more time to get our vernacular down. So we sent out pre-reads and then used the quiz that I talked about earlier to set a baseline of understanding of terms that would be used throughout the workshop. In our particular case, we really needed to agree on our definitions around marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads. But we really couldn't afford a lengthy discussion of those terms, or even worse, that single vocal participant taking us down the rabbit hole when we had so much we needed to accomplish. I also think that workshops aren't the right time to teach. Do that beforehand if needed. The workshop needs to be a time to collaborate and problem solve those wicked problems that Paul talked about. Don't underestimate the time that your facilitator will need in order to put together a tight agenda with the practical exercises that capture the perspectives of all your participants that you invite. And then lastly, document the customer journey in collaborative tools and not in the tools that only offer you a picture. You really want to be able to turn your customer journey maps into process maps so that the builders can build them. Signavio is one of the tools in our toolbox that we absolutely love. It's the tool we use to bring the creatives and engineers together in one place.
Wow. All right. So that's a lot there to go over, and hopefully, Keith, it's been just a pleasure to be able to partner with you, and I've been honored to have the chance to work with you on figuring out how to do this at Tyson with so many firsts that you keep knocking down another first almost every week, right?
Yeah, the value of design thinking really becomes apparent as we start small and continue to tackle bigger, more challenging problems and need new ways of thinking and honestly getting to new answers. I hope that today Paul and I have presented you with practical tips for when and how to facilitate your next remote design thinking workshop.
Thanks, Keith. Again, it's just been an honor to work with you on this. So if you're interested in learning more about remote design thinking workshops, feel free to reach out to me directly. We had only so much time today, and there was so much more that we could have covered. I think the hardest part about this was figuring out what to throw out versus what to put into the presentation. But if you'd like to learn more, we have a blog entry on our website at limaconsulting.com called Design Thinking Remotely, 11 Tips for a Successful Workshop. And there's also a case study actually that we are launching there around the work that we've done actually at Tyson. So again, Keith, thank you for your willingness to share lessons learned. It's been a wild ride, and I'm honored to be a part of your journey so far.
Well, Paul, we've found a good partner in Lima Consulting. I can't thank you enough for your part in our digital transformation journey.
It's our pleasure. And as we finish off here, just a shout out to our friends over at Signavio for giving us the tools that kind of brought Keith and I together and that we're using. So that concludes the formal presentation. Please feel free to submit questions to myself. Our contact information is there if you need us. Thanks, everybody.
Time for a break now, a perfect opportunity to visit the virtual exhibition hall and our lovely sponsor booths, or indeed hang out with your fellow attendees in the virtual lounge. I'll see you soon.